Hey there, welcome to another episode of Beyond Analytics, where we talk about data analytics and AI. Today, we'll be talking about an interesting topic, ROI and data analytics. And we have a guest today, Brian. Brian, before we start, do you want to give a brief introduction about yourself before we kick off?
Sure. So my name is Brian Field, and I'm the Vice President of Analytics at Stratavision. And Stratavision's AI-powered computer vision platform revolutionizes on-site analytics. We enable businesses to unlock actionable insights for smarter decision making and increase operational efficiency and enhance loss prevention. And my role here focuses on helping clients to maximize their ROI by transforming desired outcomes into actionable use cases and leveraging data to provide insights into shopper and associate behaviors. And then prior to working at Stratavision, I spent the better part of 4 decades working directly in retail and overseeing the retail consulting program at another global retail analytics provider. And my retail sector experience includes specialty apparel, consumer electronics, and housewares for companies like Chico's FAS, David's Bridal, Circuit City, and Macy's.
That's quite interesting, actually, right? And a couple of things stood out from that introduction, right? I believe actionable and decision making. I feel that's probably centered around some of the things that we'll be discussing today, right? Let's start with ROI, right? ROI for technology solutions or even tools, right, has always been fuzzy, right? How I wish there would have been a formula to get the ROI for such tools. And it gets more and more fuzzy when it comes to having a data function or even an analytics function, right? And we were speaking earlier about it, and you mentioned a very interesting thing, right? Working backwards. And I found it very interesting. So, do you want to kind of drill down on what that exactly meant?
Sure. And just to be clear, based on my background in retail, I learned this process the hard way, which was making mistakes of not going backwards. So the whole concept here is that you first want to start with what problems need to be solved. Too many people who get excited about technology and want to introduce it into an organization actually think about, well, here's a technology. Now let's figure out how we're going to use it. The problem with that is that doesn't lead you to a return on investment. So you want to start with, what kind of problems? What is the desired outcome that you want to have? And just for kind of the sake of discussion here, let's just say that for example, what the problem I'm trying to solve is that I'm improving store revenue. I want to be able to increase store revenue. So once you've established what the problem is, now you got to look at, well, what are you doing now to try and resolve that? What are the current problem solving approaches? And also, why is it that the approach that you're taking isn't optimal? And maybe that might be, well, we're trying to increase the number of buying shoppers that then lead you back towards improving store revenue. Third piece to this is, what are the focus initiatives underway to solve the problem? So if you think about that higher level of maybe I want to increase the number of buying shoppers, now you're starting to get into more of the tactical approach. And that's that the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to increase conversion rates. Another way you might want to do it is I just want to increase the number of shoppers that I get, increase the store traffic. But we're going to narrow focus on, let's just say we want to increase the conversion. The next level is leveraging these initiatives, like increasing the conversion rate. What use cases can you come up with that or develop that'll help you? And you need to do that based on smart actions. And smart, everybody knows what smart goals are. It's specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, it's relevant, and it's time bound. So maybe the way you're going to do that to improve your conversion rate is, I want to look at improving the store layout. So finally, you get to, what data do you have or do you plan to have based on whatever technology you're trying to integrate into the program to be able to prove out, did the use case that you do contribute and improve the conversion rates that then got you to increase the number of buying shoppers that improved the store revenue. So I want to talk a little bit about the SMART goals here, but before I do that, I want to stop and give you a chance if you want to ask any questions.
That's an interesting take, right? And typically, when it comes to things like AI, for example, right, we have been at least most part of 24 and 25, we have been hearing the AI aspect or integrate AI into the operations or even beyond operations being directed by leadership towards the company, right? And this one-liner directive typically boils down to or does not boil down to what problem are you trying to solve, right? Is it like just integrating AI for the sake of it, or is it because that you're trying to solve a particular problem, and is that even a problem in the first place?
I think it is a challenge. I think that there are many people that think that just by adding AI or adding technology, it doesn't have to be AI technology, suddenly you can solve your problem. But you've got to do more than that. And that kind of gets back to just the example I'm using about improving the store layout. You might say, well, I want to add AI or I want to add more technology that's going to do that. But without a real action plan to create that improvement, you're not going to have a return on your investment. So we kind of talked about the store layout. Let's talk a little bit more about that for a second. So if I'm just saying I want to improve store layout, that doesn't really mean a whole lot. What does that mean? We want to get to something specific. That's why I talked about SMART goals. You want to, maybe what it is I want to increase sales by optimizing store layout to improve conversion by 5%. That's a really specific thing. And if you think about people trying to integrate technology or integrate AI, this requires a partnership between maybe the operators who understand that improving conversion by 5% is a doable thing, and the technologists who understand all of the technology and AI that can bring it all together to do that improvement. So you've got a specific goal there. You have to be able to then measure it. So you want to measure shopper movement within departments. Maybe you're including dwell times and conversion rates, and you want to set up a test so that you've got a pre-layout change and a post-layout change to be able to say what happened. It's got to be achievable. So in the case of improving the store layout and talking about conversion, maybe it's built around camera technology that is integrated in the stores. And so therefore, in order to make it achievable, it's got to be the right technology. It's got to be the right infrastructure. It's got to have the right capabilities to be able to measure things in the targeted selling areas. It's got to be relevant. And what that means is that you've got to get buy-off from the operators and, quite frankly, from the finance guys to say that reprioritizing the layouts are going to make the store more engaging to shop, and therefore it increases the opportunity conversion, which therefore can increase revenue. And then finally, it's got to be time bound. If your tests, and I'm sure you've seen this yourself, don't have a time bound element to it, the tests just go on forever and you never come to a return on investment conclusion. So it's got to be time bound. In this example, maybe it's matching the timelines for when seasonal floor sets are due.
That's interesting, and then we'll come to the time bond aspect because that was something that I wanted to talk to you about as well. When you talk about the backward approach, right? Maybe it's a bit cliche, but I tend to typically think of it as one of the basic business model frameworks that have been taught to us, right? The five whys. And in your case, you want to optimize the store layout. Why do you want to optimize it? Maybe increasing conversion rate. Then comes the second why. So why do you want to increase the conversion rate, right? Increase revenue. Why do we want to increase revenue? So um, maybe it's a bit cliche to kind of use the theoretical business frameworks here, but probably it's one of the driving factors of the whole working backwards function.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And this is just one example. There are so many different things that can be done. But if you start with the technology, you're not working backwards because what you're trying to do in that case is figure out a use case or return on investment that will fit that technology versus I've got a problem I've got to solve. And how can I leverage this technology to improve my problem?
That is true. Almost equal to saying that, okay, if you don't have a problem, you probably don't need a data function altogether, which
I don't know if I
which
go
is,
that
I
far.
mean,
Everybody's got an opportunity.
exactly, that's right. Like, which is the extreme end of it, but yeah.
Yeah.
One of the interesting aspects when we spoke earlier is behavior, right? And you spoke about not just customer behavior, but also how teams operate or how teams behave and whether those things actually change, right? Do you want to touch upon that a bit when it comes to tying back to the ROI?
Yeah, sure. So there's multiple layers of behavior that get involved in this. And to my mind, every metric that you're dealing with should bring you back to a desired behavior or to identify an undesired behavior. So let's just use a couple examples here. So if I'm trying to improve conversion, a role that's being played in this is the shopper themselves. Are they buying? Are they buying versus not buying? Another aspect is the associate. Is the associate helping to facilitate a sale, or are they not? And there's kind of two aspects to that, which would be if I'm a high touch retailer, I've got salespeople that are specifically focused on getting a shopper to make a purchase. So it's working with them on are they doing the right thing? Can we monitor that for with whatever technology we're utilizing? Is the training right for the associates? But there's another aspect in what I would call more of a self-serve mode. If I'm a retailer that doesn't spend a lot of time saying, well, I need to have my associates trying to close more customers, it's just I need them to stock things. And I need to make sure that the inventory is right, and I need to make sure the cashiers are where they need to be. It's more of a low touch model. And there's as many behaviors that go into that as anywhere else. So, for example, if I've got a high dwell rate. And what I mean by that is the amount of time I'm spending at a specific point in a store, overall in the store, or in a department in the store. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, you'd think on the surface that, well, a high dwell is a good thing. It means you're spending more time. Well, not if you're a convenience store. You want to get them in, you want to get them out. In a bookstore, maybe. But the whole idea is if you can use data to help you identify those times where the dwells are higher, then you can make a decision on, do I want them to be higher? What other aspects need to go into that? Maybe it's high because they can't find what they're looking for. Maybe it's high because there's no associate that could take care of them. So now we're getting into behaviors. Last thing I want to say on behaviors is that there's also the corporate people that play a role in the behaviors. So we talked about that the shopper can't find goods. Well, that's a planner's domain. And if the planner hasn't appropriately planned that store, or if it isn't shipped to the store in the appropriate amount of time, well, that's a behavior that can be addressed. So using all of the metrics and then deciding what behaviors are related to each of the metrics allows you to make better decisions that lead to a better ROI.
You point out a couple of interesting things, right? One is when you talk about dwell time, right? I mean, I treat it as a metric. And you and me, we both have led like analytic teams. And I'm coming to the dreaded so what, right? This is something that we discussed last time as well, right? And with data teams churning out metrics or analytics at a faster pace, more so than ever, given the fact that vibe coding and all has increased drastically in the past year or so, how do you think data teams should approach this problem, right? The classic example that you took about is dwell time, right? Dwell time given in the specific context might be good or bad. And that's just one context, right? You will have multiple aspects to it. So how do you look at this so what aspect when it comes to data teams or when it comes to a data engineer trying to solve a particular problem for their customer?
Okay, so a couple of things here. So what is so important to be able to determine an ROI? Because everything before so what is just theory. And hey, I've got these brand new cool tools to use, or I've discovered this new metric that we've never had before. If you can't answer so what, then you can't get to a return on investment. It's a critical question. It was a question that I used to report directly to a chief financial officer. And he would always ask me that question when I'd bring things to him to say, hey, here's what I'd like to do. So what? So the idea is to, within teams, within an organization, to come up with the so what. It can't be just an operator in isolation or a technologist in isolation or a person in loss prevention in isolation. There should be a team. There should be a partnership. And even if it's an informal partnership where you're just going back and forth to say, okay, I've got this cool new technology or these new metrics that we're working in. How would you use them? That's really where the discussion of so what starts. And I don't think projects will be particularly successful if you can't answer the so what to then take you to an ROI.
When you talk about partnerships, we just did one episode on data as a service versus data as a product, and the collaboration aspect. And there we spoke about the collaboration aspect of it, right? Which kind of boils down to your partnership aspect, which is what I feel a lot of organizations miss. And a lot of organizations, I believe, tend to rely too much on the technology piece when it comes to data, and more or less is not driven by business, which probably as a industry that needs to change. What are your thoughts on this before we move on to the next aspect?
I think you're right. I think that the data has to lead you someplace. I I tend to talk in terms of insights because data is just a fact. You know, what is your conversion? What is your dwell time? What is your revenue? What is your profit margin percentage? The insight is based on observation, based on the behavioral changes, based on a plan of action with smart goals that we've put into place. That is telling you what will improve the business and drive performance. And it doesn't take a lot to determine a lot of margin.
I'll come back to the earlier aspect of smaller or quicker outcomes, right? Not playing the infinity loop. And early ROI is often linked towards maybe faster decisions, optimized operations, even for that matter, no gut decisions, right? How do you look at small experiments or prototypes or even MVPs for that matter, tied to some immediate outcomes versus bigger bets, longer engagements, given the fact that 2025 has seen companies move towards the shorter engagement bits more than the earlier years? So how do you look at that?
Sure. So there's a couple things here. First of all, I think doing a small project is not a bad way to start because if you throw yourself completely into it, depending on how many, how big a span of control of stores or shopping centers or whatever you're working with, it can be a little overwhelming. But the key is you got to do what we talked about, which is having smart goals and working backwards to be able to get there. You can start with a small assumption with one department or a handful of stores. But if you really want to understand what the impact is, you need a decent count of departments or locations to be able to do that. And it's something that I've tried to work with my clients on specifically because it's not good enough to say, well, we tried this in one store. All right, let's roll it out in however many stores I've got. That could be dangerous. What you should do is have enough stores where you can test your theory in different scenarios. This one's in a rural environment. This one is in an urban environment. This one is in a mall. This one is in an open air shopping center. You've got several different possibilities. And the idea is that it's even better to put in, if you're doing this with technology, to put in the technology in all the stores that you plan on testing, but only actual make behavioral changes in some of them. And that might sound like, well, I'm wasting my time by putting them in the other stores, but you're actually not, because now you can see if the smart test that you're doing is really moving the needle, because you've got, here are the stores where I made my change. Here are the stores where I can observe what's going on, but I did not make my change.
That's interesting, right? And it's so similar to the sample size that we often talk about when it comes to models as well.
Yeah, you need that.
Right. That's great. Thanks a lot, Brian. Thanks a lot. It was a very engaging conversation. Thanks a lot for coming onto the podcast.
Sure, happy to do it.